I went into Andor's first season thinking I didn't necessarily need it. After checking out a few live-action Star Wars shows for nostalgia's sake, I was fine with the idea that the time of caring about something which was such a big part of my childhood had passed. I could understand the appeal of having that many years worth of lore to sift through, and how just about everyone knows something about the universe, but those are not necessarily things that I watch television shows for. Even though it was better than what I'd seen up to that point, the Andor series premiere didn't hook me right away, but there was this short scene that I kept thinking about after the fact. It was Syril Karn's introduction to the story, where he's standing at attention in front of his boss's desk at the corporate security headquarters on Morlana 1. He's talking about Cassian Andor's crime in the opening sequence of the show, and is very noticeably gung-ho about working the case. His boss tries to talk him down by giving him a laundry list of compelling reasons to let this one go. We understand what kind of guy his boss is. Why someone in his position would want to spin this in a way that makes it seem like it wasn't what it is while limiting liability for their company. And we get a sense that this is how business is done, so it all should make sense. When he finishes, he asks Syril directly if he's absorbing his meaning like we are. When he answered, "Trying, sir," and taking into consideration that this was all set up by the question about altering his uniform, something he definitely did, you could tell this guy was going to be interesting and persistent after he essentially ignored his boss, whose plan seemed sensible enough given the context. It was there that I thought maybe there is something to this show. The culmination of all these little things that make it so you can't look away from these characters, that's what makes the latest Andor episodes work so well. It's wild to me that this is probably the best 3-episode block of the series, while also being the one where problems from compressing so much story into one season start to show. The highs are so high that they can carry you right past how abrupt some of the character beats are, and how at times it feels like it's crossing things off its "we have to sort this out before we get to Rogue One" list. So yeah, not ideal taking something that would have given us multiple seasons of compelling TV and condensing it into one. But despite this grave mistake from the studio, everyone involved seems determined to make the most out of what they have to work with. That includes a packed city square where one character starts to sing the Gorman national anthem, and one by one the whole crowd joins in. It's this great moment of community and the solidarity amongst the oppressed, and it's a terrific set piece that gives the impending massacre meaning. Because if you think about it, this was always going to happen. From the moment the words "deep substrate foliated calcite" were mentioned at Director Krennic's secret mountain retreat, you knew Gorman was cooked. We know who these guys are and where this is going. They discuss wiping out a population over finger foods because these are just things they do. And if we zoom out, I guess it's kind of Andor's thing. How do you make a story where you already know its ending exciting to watch? Not an easy thing to do. I started with Syril because he helped get me hooked, but his story is also the opposite side of the coin compared to Andor's. They both go on a journey of discovery at the same time. Syril gets swept up into a system where he learns to thrive as a functionary, while Cassian becomes a reluctant operator for a righteous rebellion. One guy is aiding and abetting crimes against humanity. At the same time, the other has adopted the tools of his enemy. They certainly haven't avoided violence, but they've been condemned to do that by the brutality of their oppressors. That is to say, those crimes against humanity. If you can get us to a point where their final showdown doesn't amount to "I'm glad that piece of trash got smoked," then we're talking about a classic TV show that can stand on its own. Before we get into making sense of how you're supposed to feel about the end of Syril's story, there are a lot of things going on as we approach the ending of Andor. This is the end too, because the series will conclude with its next arc, when the timeline catches up to the events of Rogue One. There'll be one final time jump to put us right before that, after this arc's time jump put us in the year BBY2. Remember, that stands for years before the Battle of Yavin, which is what happens in the original movie, and the first thing we see in Andor's 7th episode is that the base there looks more like it did in Rogue One. This is the same planet Cassian was stranded on in the season's first arc, so we see how rapidly things are changing. When Wilman arrives, the changes are further underlined as we learn that Cassian has settled in on Yavin with Bix and hasn't been in contact with Luthen. Andor is nursing a blaster injury surgery, and you get the sense that the previous years he spent working for Luthen have taken a toll. We saw that. This started in the last group of episodes, so it's not a big surprise, but the time skip here forces us to fill in the blanks more than in other areas of the story. The last time we saw these characters, Willman was taking a hit on the Rhino, and Bix had just taken the lead on the mission to deliver vengeance to Dr. Gorst, with Cassian in a support role. Even though it's on the rustic end of the spectrum, their new jungle pad, or perhaps bungalow is the right name for it, is a step up from the Coruscant safe house. And their being there signals movement towards addressing all the big questions that need answering before Rogue One. How did the rebellion transform from the loose bunch of cells we've seen in Andor to how it is in the movies? How does Cassian go from being a self-interested small-timer to becoming a leader? And why aren't Luthen or Bix mentioned at all? Wilmon brings news that Dedra's on Gorman, which turns out to be enough to get Cassian to leave Yavin eventually. There's a short but key moment here, where after seeing the reaction when Bix hears her name, the camera lingers on her after Wilmon tells her Dedra's a monster, and they won't have a better chance to take her out. While we'll never get the details about what happened in between, in this format of fast-forwarding to key events, the show at least pays service to how complicated these situations are for its characters. And before Cassian commits to return to Gorman, it also pays service to the Force. I suppose it's unavoidable. The show is better for avoiding it for as long as possible, but the Rebels do say, "May the Force be with you" to each other. At least the Mon Calamari dude says it at the end of the movie, so the Force is a thing that exists in their world, even if Cassian primarily associates it with scammers at this point. The Force healer Bix introduces him to is legit and takes away the pain he's experiencing from that blaster burn. The interaction also reaffirms her faith when she senses that Cassian is a messenger. This is something Bix has felt before as well, and the very non-Force sensitive Luthen kind of echoes it later in the episode. So while I think Andor is better when it focuses on what it takes for regular people to build a rebellion, it is interesting to see how different rebels square the faith necessary for something like that. They tie that together perfectly when the hotel worker introduces the line Cassian will use again later in Rogue One. Rebellions are built on hope. Cassian says it to Jyn early in the movie, and she later repeats it to Mon Mothma. All of this is a lot to heap on the normal setup we expect from the first Andor episode in the season 2 format of releasing 3 of them at once. As mentioned, Cassian decides to head to Gorman, but we get the sense that he views it as his last job. Like, I'm just gonna do one more and then get out. Vela's on Yavin too, and after Cassian pisses off the command by leaving, she goes to talk to Bix about how he needs to start behaving like a leader. His back and forth on the way out gives the show a chance to bring back General Draven, a recognizable character from the movie, and show that Cassian still isn't the leader they refer to him as at the beginning of the film. Vel's talk with Bix is another step on her path to the decision she makes at the end. Partagaz summarizes the situation Andor is walking into with 3 words: bad luck, Gorman. Unsurprisingly, Dedra is doing a bang-up job setting up everything for a false flag if they need to go in that direction. I've held back from drawing too much attention to how the Empire's crackdown seems to line up with current events, something I'll reverse on later, but I've held off because a lot of stuff just seems timeless more than anything else. The Gore looked like the French Resistance, and the Empire looked like the Nazis when they met at the Maltine Divide. So you think about the World War II era, but situations like this happen throughout our history. The show does an unflinching job of showing how this works at any time if you find yourself in the way when power wants something. The ISB starts the Whispering campaign, recruits news media to amplify false claims, takes what they want, pushes the people to the edge, and if they don't fight back on their own, it creates the spark itself to fan the flames to justify the need to take control. As I've said, this isn't surprising from our perspective, and it isn't surprising to Dedra when she gets the call. But when Syril catches wind of what's happening, the episode reaches a whole different level. It's funny because the beginning of the last set of episodes had that nice fake out where you thought his time in Gorman might have turned him sympathetic when he was just playing double agent. Dedra keeping him in the dark about what he was working towards was built in, and you kind of just expected she'd be able to handle him when the truth came out. out. She tries to do just that early in episode 7, saying they'll be heading back to Coruscant to be together and they'll be rewarded. It's exactly everything this character always wanted, right? The snag comes because he doesn't know the real plan. He can't figure out what they've accomplished, and when she kisses her man to placate him, it doesn't have the desired effect. He looks for Enza, and she answers with a slap when he tries to get her to offer up some outside agitators. Earlier in the episode, the Gorman front met and argued about how to proceed. Ryland's advocating for peaceful resistance while others wanted to fight back. Lazine, who was part of the scuffle that led to Cinta's death and starts the sing-along in the scene I mentioned earlier, here he tells the group that they're the Gore. If they take that from us, then what's worth saving? It's what they need to hear in the moment, and it's just sad when having nothing left to save has always been the Empire's plan. Not long after Cassian arrives, the troops turn the square around the monument in Palmo into a fortress. This, along with the reports of mining equipment landing in the countryside, is making Dedra's job harder. The way Major Partagaz handles her is surprisingly chilling. He's coming from a position where he feels that they have control of the narrative, and so they have no reason to hold back. Once that's out of the way, the rest is pretty easy from their position. This comes out when Syril finds out what's really going on when he runs into Rylands in the street. It also makes its way to Coruscant, where the Gorman senator approaches Mon Mothma. He says they don't even bother to lie badly anymore, which feels like the final humiliation. The tension in the build-up on the planet is amazing. Cassian gets ready to try to find a way to complete his mission and take out Dedra. Syril makes his way to the square while everyone else pours in and chants, "We are the Gore, the galaxy is watching." This is chilling in a similar way to Partagaz talking to Dedra. The Gore are saying this as if it might protect them while knowing it probably won't happen that way. They're starting to get resigned to their fate in real time. It's what you do when you realize there isn't anything you can do, and know how easy it is for the other side once they no longer see you as people. So when they start to sing, there's no delusion that somehow their solidarity will change the outcome. It's just a way to seek comfort in their people in their final moments. They know it's inevitable as much as we know it. If nothing else, we know the Empire finishes the Death Star, and will use it to destroy Bail Organa's planet with him on it just a couple of years down the road. The trick is that while we know Gorman's destruction is inevitable, we also know it's a story of rebellion. There, it doesn't even need to rely on what comes after, because the thing that keeps them fighting to the end exists in all of us. It does a commendable job of capturing the tragedy, but what sets Andor apart is that it doesn't stop there. The doomed resistance has turned one of the bootlickers, even if it's a bit too late to make a difference. When confronted with the idea that everything he thought he was doing on Gorman was built on a lie, Syril's whole world starts falling apart. Realizing his partner, the only person we'd seen care for him, was lying to him, sent him over the edge. He storms into her office, demanding answers, and the situation quickly escalates to assault. While uncomfortable to watch, somehow this didn't strike me as gratuitous. Dedra is a compelling character who hasn't racked up any sympathy. Seeing villains get their just desserts isn't out of the ordinary. Let's not forget, Syril initially inserted himself into her life by stalking her, something she pointed out herself. So her surprise shouldn't come from him being capable of this, but from her mistaken belief that she'd be able to control him in a way that it would never come to this. What's fascinating is the emotions that the betrayal and cruelty of the violence can still evoke even when it's happening to these two awful people. She eventually comes clean, and her justification is that Krennic was doing this either way, so why not benefit from it? When she can't get the desired response, she throws the idea that he didn't mind the promotions in his face. As intense as this is, in a way it's just the beginning. Syril breaks off the relationship and heads out into the trap that he played a key role in helping his ex set up. The Gore have maneuvered themselves firmly into it. A unit of undertrained soldiers who Dedra said looked like kids is positioned in the center of the square. After Dedra pulls herself together, she tries to send a subordinate after Syril and finds out Partagaz is on the line. At least she takes a beat before she gives the order. And once she does, their sniper shoots one of their young soldiers so that his commander can start firing into the crowd. From there, it plays out like it was designed. designed to. The Resistance takes heavy losses but manages to hang on until the Imperial commander activates a unit of KX security droids that Syril passed earlier. They start tossing people around like ragdolls, and how easy this is and their unstoppable nature makes it feel completely hopeless. Still, Cassian bides his time waiting for a shot at Dedra. He has her in his crosshairs twice. The first time he gets distracted is when the guy from the hotel gets his heroic moment, detonating an explosion that takes out a group of stormtroopers. By the time Cassian regroups and gets her in his sights again, Syril has noticed he's there and realizes the thing he's been chasing all these years is right in front of him. This sets up the best ending imaginable for this character. After he comes out of the daze he'd been in, as blaster bolts flew by and KX droids spiked humans to the ground, he doesn't even realize he's saving Dedra's life when he charges. After everything that happened, seeing his obsession unlocks a different level of violence that I'm not even sure he knew he had in him. While he hadn't changed sides in any meaningful way, he was in a space where everything that mattered lost its meaning. He was drawn to the Empire because it offered something he craved: order. We know that growing up with his mother primed him to take what the Empire and later Dedra were offering: structure, and at least the facade that they were bringing order to the galaxy. I like to think while he's standing in the middle of that square, he realizes that in his blind devotion, he helped create the disorder he's surrounded by, and people he came to know were honorable paid the ultimate price. Maybe he's just standing there thinking he got away from his controlling mother only to walk into the same thing with Dedra. We'll never know. What we do know is that he started following Andor because he couldn't accept the order from his boss to cover up what really happened on Morlana. Getting more of the same from this thing that he has to believe is beyond reproach predictably melts his brain. Spotting Cassian gives him enough of a jolt that they spend the next 3 minutes trying to beat each other to death. It's ferocious, and I think on most days Cassian should have the upper hand, but no one comes out on top on this day. After an explosion and some stray shots from outside send Cassian scrambling, Syril grabs his gun and has the drop on it. Before he can pull the trigger, Andor asks the question that gives the episode its name: who are you? And as the realization sets in that this guy he's been following for all this time, the obsession that put him on the path to be where he is in this moment, who when he finally comes out on top and is ready to bring him to an end, this thing he's been fantasizing about for as long as he can remember, when that guy doesn't even know who he is, what can he do but drop his gun? I guess to be clear, Cassian shouldn't know who he is. He really has no idea why this guy dressed in civilian clothes attacked him. I suppose he might be able to recognize him as a bureaucrat, but still, how does that lead to what's happening? Regardless, it's such a crushing thing to hear because he gave everything to a job he can't go back to and spent all this time chasing someone who doesn't know he exists. It's one of those things that just doesn't add up when you try to make sense of it. How can you think of someone so much when they don't even know who you are? He's as insignificant in that moment as he was in his cubicle in the Bureau of Standards before he came to Gorman. No amount of pockets, piping, and some light tailoring will change that. He doesn't have long to think about it because seconds after he lowers his gun, Ryland's, the one who'd been pressing for peace, ends up shooting him with his. It's pretty perfect. Because of the way things lined up, it was possible to see a complete turnaround from Syril. In a different version of the story, finding out that Dedra was lying to him happens in a way that he gets a chance to make up for some of the harm he's responsible for. But this is better. He sees the fascist government for what it is, understands the error of his ways, the part he played in it, and he is a victim in a sense, but how does that distinguish him from all the people who died in the massacre? Somehow that's not the end of the episode. As Cassian and Willman flee the square, we learn how he acquired the KX droid always by his side in Rogue One. Sam, who was responsible for Cinta's death last week, redeems himself a bit when he crashes a transport into it. Later, he'll get reprogrammed on Yavin and become K2SO. As he drives away, you hear Drina, the Gorman front member Willman hooked up with, which, not to get too distracted here, seems like a thing he does on every planet he spends some time on. We listen as she makes an impassioned call for help on the radio. She begs anyone listening to get the message out if they have any faith left in truth. It's paired with closing shots of what's left of the resistance, and Diego Luna doing one of those affected blank stares he does so well, as he struggles to absorb what he just experienced in the last hour we watched. And this time we see him shed a tear for the hundreds of murdered Gormans in Palmo Plaza. If it was surprising to feel something for Syril as his world ground to a halt, the scene with Dedra in the safe room is almost mind-boggling. It's affecting, and you could chalk it up purely to the performance if you have to, but as you watch her pull at her uniform, Dedra reveals that she's human too. And if you're not sure what to do with that, they even top it with a shot of Edie crying as she watches the news on Coruscant. It's a loaded closing shot for the episode, propped up by the ISB talking points on her TV going out everywhere, instead of Drina's message we heard earlier. Won't anyone help? This question is repeated in episode 9, as the Gorman senator is publicly arrested in the Galactic Senate building without a warrant or charges. This will serve as the final straw, leading to a series-defining speech from Mon Mothma and bringing all the major players together. The massacre created a situation where the rebel sympathizers in the Senate can't remain silent, but know that speaking out will lead to them being taken into custody, at least with the possibility that they could disappear for good. If that were to happen, especially if Mon Mothma were arrested, the rebellion would be snuffed out. Fresh off his last job, which left him wanting to leave to make his own decisions more than ever, Cassian is the only person who can prevent that. Do you see how the one more job and I'm out thing works yet? He goes undercover as a journalist named Ronnie Guja, which is one of the best names the series has come up with. Clea says it's perfect, and I won't disagree. True to form, she swats down his idea about leaving the rebellion after this one job is finished. She doesn't have time for it's too much or too hard. In the same way she pushes back at Luthen's mini crises of faith, she reminds Andor this is bigger than him, that they're fighting so that everyone can make their own decisions, not just him. She also mentions that the senator he'll be protecting is risking it all. And you notice that she doesn't mention her name, and it's here I realize Cassian and Mon don't know each other. I said he shouldn't know Syril because their encounter on Ferrix was so brief and amounted to him asking him questions at gunpoint from behind. He wasn't even looking him in the face. He's never even met Mon Mothma. We know much more than he does going in, so we understand what it means when she tells Bail Organa that she needs to make a speech about Gorman. Throughout the episode, the show reminds us of the corruption amongst the senators, the ones who are playing both sides, the planted agents like Mon's driver, and the surveillance that's everywhere, which we see as their offices are being bugged. Mon Mothma and Bail work out a plan that neither of them can feel that great about. He'll make it so she can give the speech, but he'll have to stay behind because the rebellion on Yavin isn't ready yet, so that will make him a hostage for all intents and purposes, while she'll address the Senate and then be forced to leave her life behind immediately afterwards. They're officially going loud. When she tells Cassian later she doesn't think she can do this, he just says welcome to the rebellion because it's becoming real right there in that moment. Bail and Mon are as competent as they come, and their plan is one they can pull off. The one problem is that the extraction team Bail put together has a compromised member reporting back to the ISB. This brings Luthen into the picture because his plant, Lonnie, is the one who set that up. Luthen tells Mon she can't leave with Bail's team, but opens by revealing her assistant has been spying on her for him, and that adds to her anxiety and general sense of mistrust. That's been building since they last saw each other and has a lot to do with how he took care of Tay. She brings that up while they go back and forth, which includes her calling him out for not caring about her and only being terrified about her arrest. He doesn't dispute this, and in a way the honesty and not insulting her intelligence probably moves her closer to trust. Still, it's not easy. She literally saw him eliminate her childhood friend as soon as he revealed himself as a potential threat. After she delivers her speech and does her part, how can she be sure it wouldn't be in his interest to get rid of her? The actors make the most of what feels like it'll probably be the last time we see these two characters together. To have Mon express she's more afraid of Luthen than anything in the moment, with everything on the line, and have him be the only one she can count on is just so much of what's good about this show. I'm not sure about the logistics of this meeting. It feels a little like, well, we just need these two characters to talk, so we'll overlook the fact that this is probably a really bad idea for both of them on the eve of her speech, but at the same time, I'm glad it's there. And I said that he didn't dispute her claim about not caring. And what I like about that is that I think he believes it. But this scene also reveals it's not true. Of course, the most memorable thing about Luthen is his speech to Lonnie when he asks what he sacrifices. You come away from that thinking this guy is set. He'll go down with the ship, but he'll never change. There are a lot of similarities in these scenes, but you can see change. Everything leading up to the speech was exactly what you expect from Andor, and really, the only thing that keeps this episode from being the best current thing in Star Wars is that it followed episode 8. Lonnie's plant in Bail's team is revealed as she has to kill another member ruthlessly when he realizes something is up. The actor they got for the role barely has any lines, but she has the perfect face for this mole role. She has a "I'm gonna come to your planet and mine your minerals, and you're gonna thank me for it" kind of thing going on. As for the speech itself, I'm not sure what I was expecting when I half chuckled at Bail saying, "Tear the shit out of this place." But I had a general sense of what the pre-existing canon about Mon leaving the Senate was, so I wasn't expecting this. The most interesting thing about the Mon Mothma character in the series has been imagining her making this sacrifice. Seeing where she comes from, seeing all the things that she has to give up, and essentially how her sacrifice comes from a completely different place than the other boots on the ground rebels. She addresses this at the beginning when she talks about coming to the Senate at an early age, which, if you never read her Wikipedia page, she became one of the youngest senators ever to hold the position as a teenager. The way the show cuts it, we see what's happening as the ISB tries to shut her down and track all the other players as they move around, and we just get the highlights from her address. The part that sucked me in was, of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. This is one of those timeless things I touched on earlier that really hits home for me because I feel like I've been watching it happen all my life. It seemed particularly bad in recent years, but has been slowly getting worse for as long as I can remember. When she says the death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil, it stirs the feeling of helplessness the lack of an objective truth can instill in you. When she pivots to calling what happened on Gorman a genocide, you can't help but think of Gaza right now. And then just think about Partagaz dressing down Dedra before they start wiping the gore off their home planet. Controlling the narrative stops being about providing a truth everyone can feel okay with, and instead becomes there's nothing you can do about it. Watching this, I couldn't help thinking that if it happened in our world, people would talk and post about it for a few days, and then something else would come along and it would be like it never happened. As silly as it sounds to say out loud, this is what the Empire is counting on, and this is why an actual organized rebellion is necessary in the story. In this episode, the point about losing truth is the same as in our world. Once it's gone, the monster that screams the loudest won't leave any air in the room for anyone else. Mon Mothma says genocide twice and is determined to ensure the truth gets out. By name-checking Emperor Palpatine as the monster screaming the loudest, she seals her fate, and it's up to Andor to get her out of there. Before I get into that, I should mention that this kinda changes the existing canon I mentioned before, or maybe it just adds to it. The cartoon Rebels has a scene with Mon fleeing the Senate. She's on the ship of the characters the show follows, and she delivers a different speech about starting the rebellion. I've watched it, and I watched an episode or two of Rebels, which was all it took to realize it wasn't something I'd be into, so this isn't a big deal for me. I did read an interview where Tony Gilroy was asked about it. It seemed like he wanted to thread the needle so that they could have Mon say what she said here, which I think was a good decision, but also leave it so it was still possible that she got a haircut, got on the Gold Squadron ship, and made the speech you see in the cartoon. I've already touched on why the extraction is complicated, but even though they haven't met, Cassian is able to win her over. He kills the agent Lonnie planted, which is shocking for her. After she makes the symbolic gesture of dropping her blue coat, she says you killed that woman in a way that reminds you she's never seen something like that firsthand. Welcome to the rebellion indeed. She almost freezes up when he has to shoot her driver, even though she knows he's ISB, but he gets her out, and everyone except Luthen regroups at the safe house. When Mon says she's not sure how to thank him, he says make it worth it, and you see that these two characters have reached the place Luthen talked about when he said he sacrificed everything. But wait a minute, Cassian still has Bix, right? She is waiting for him on Yavin when he returns with Wilman and Drina. After a pretty hectic 72 hours, he's ready to relax, and he's ready to talk about leaving to go somewhere the Empire hasn't ruined yet. He makes his case, she makes him some tea to help him sleep and listens. It's the same story, hasn't he done enough? He tells her he wants to be with her. You can understand why he'd feel that way. When he wakes up, she's gone, and she leaves a recording to tell him what she couldn't say to his face because she knows he'd just talk her around. She has to go because if he gave this up for her, she wouldn't be able to live with herself. If he wants to take the comfortable path, he can make that choice, but it can't be for her because she knows the rebellion needs him, and it needs to win. Adria Arjona absolutely sells it in this scene, and it's powerful enough to work in that way. I found myself moved and relieved that she didn't get killed off. It's a little extra sad because the intention isn't to say goodbye forever. She fully expects to be reunited once the rebellion finishes its job. And I don't know, I think it could have been handled better if there had been more time, but it doesn't ruin the show for me. There's another slight nod to the Force here, and I suppose people heavily invested in the lore might find that interesting. Personally, it doesn't make a difference if Bix is Force sensitive to me. I like it as a story where ordinary people do extraordinary things. When you're a kid, the Force seems cool because you feel like you can make the world how you think it should be. Watching Andor reminds us that as adults, we can all do that in our own way. Cassian is special, but it's in a way that any of us could be, just like we could be a cog in the machine like Syril. Try to avoid the latter and aim for the former, and under no circumstances be like Dedra. In a world where you're bombarded with the idea that the truth doesn't matter, listen to Clea. There's no choice but to try. We knew Bix wasn't in Rogue One, but Cassian wasn't alone either. The episode ends on a lighter note when he doesn't even get a chance to let it register that he's alone on Yavin. He gets word that they're ready to fire up the reprogrammed security droid he brought in with him. We saw these things in action and understand the extra precautions involved. When it finally powers up, you immediately recognize that it's K2SO when he apologizes and asks him to point his gun somewhere else. The first time I watched the episode, I was still trying to process everything that came before it and was a little annoyed that it kept going. Did they need to introduce the droid? Wasn't it implied how this played out? Then it hit me that its purpose in the movie is to bring some levity into an otherwise pretty dark story, and it kind of makes sense to set up the final arc on that note. There's one other scene in episode 9 to mention before I wrap this up that highlights the attention to detail on the show and the spirit of the rebellion at the same time. On Yavin, you see Vel hold up a blaster and ask who it belongs to. Melshi, who will appear in Rogue One and had escaped the Narkina 5 prison with Andor in Season 1, raises his hand to say it's his. Cassian gave it to him after the escape, and Vel recognizes it because he had it during the Aldhani heist, and Skeen had made a stink about it being corporate issue. It originally came from Primor Security. Cassian stole it from Syril Khan when he was on Ferrix trying to arrest him. These episodes were really something, and I could go on about them forever. I'm not excited that the end of the show is coming, but I can't wait to see it, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.